Shalom Aleichem. We are reviewing Likutei Sichos, volume 20, Chaye Sara, Sicha number 3. This is Sicha that I refer to as a very special Sicha. It's dangerous to say that because every Sicha is special and every Sicha is Gilui Elikus and combining all areas of Torah, etc. But there are certain Sichos that, to me, jump off the page. They look simple and they're beyond deep and special and incredible and central to the whole system. So the Sicha is about the famous Medrash, which teaches us that Shleisha Nenu B'man Apiyam, there were three who were answered by immediately when they spoke. Sometimes people daven and there's an answer, there's no answer, it's later. But there were three who were answered immediately. Eliezer, the servant of Avram, the minute he said that he wants a woman for Yitzchak and she wants it to fit this in this description, she came walking out. And by Moshe Rabbeinu, when he made the ultimatum with Kairach to prove that he's the real prophet and he didn't make any of this up, he said as soon as he finished speaking, the earth opened up. And by Shlomo HaMelech, when he finished building the Beis HaMikdash and the whole thing, they finally built it. And yet the Shekhinah didn't yet show up. The heavenly fire didn't yet show up. So he gave a tefillah. It's a long tefillah. It's many, many psukim. I don't know, 10 psukim or maybe more. And he davened how the Beis HaMikdash should be and that Hashem should be in his home and et cetera, et cetera. And then the next pasuk is, and it came to pass as soon as he finished saying those words, boom, the heavenly fire came down. So these are the three cases in the Tanakh. Now the Rebbe brings in the footnotes that it is said in general the prayers of a tzaddik are always answered immediately, but clearly these three stand out more than any others because these are the three where it's explicit in Torah, and the Medrash makes that point that three were answered immediately, whereas others are maybe they're answered quickly, but you don't say the same level of immediacy. What's special about these three? And the Rebbe discusses this. That clearly this is not about the greatness of these three people. There were many other greats. Plus, if you're talking about the greatness of people, how does Eliezer get into the mix? I mean, he's a wonderful person and he was a servant of Abraham, but you can't compare him to the Tzaddikei Olam, to the greats, Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the prophets. He was a servant of Abraham. So he fits into the three. So obviously this is not about the greatness of the people. This is about the importance of their prayer, of what they were praying for. And the Rebbe says there needs to be a common denominator. Since the Medrash equalizes them, puts them in one flow, it needs to be a common denominator between all three. They all three prayed for a similar bracha, a bracha that requires and resonates with immediacy, and they had it. Let's discuss it. So right away, the Rebbe takes a plain chazal, which just says, hey, by the way, there's three people. And it says, whoa, it's not about the people, it's about the prayer. What's the thread? Beautiful. Starts to explain it. On top of the screen, you have the Medrash, the three righteous that were answered. And what are they? As we said, Eliezer, Abraham's servant, Moshe, and Shlomo. And those are the psukim, the verses that the Medrash quotes. Just to point out that Eliezer has even an edge over the others. By them it says, as they finished davening, that's when it happened. By Eliezer it says, he had not yet finished speaking. And then Rivka came out. Had him kila l'dabar, it's even a higher level. Okay. So the Rebbe says, let's look into Rambam. It's extraordinary. This is nominally a Chassidus Sicha, a very deep Chassidus Sicha. But nevertheless, the Rebbe, to him, the whole Torah is one, and he begins with a Rambam. The Rebbe maintains that Rambam has everything. Everything. all the areas of Torah wound up into one. And in the world of halacha, where do we find the concept of immediacy? Where do we find the concept of Hashem answering you right away? There's no such condition that when you daven, Hashem is going to answer you right away. Hashem will answer you, or He won't answer you. The concept that He'll answer you right away. Where is it in halacha? It's in Rambam Hilchos Tshuva, the laws of Tshuva, chapter 7. The Rebbe quotes from these two halachas in chapter 7, halacha 6 and halacha 7. If you take a look through them, they look very similar. And we are Chabadniks, so we're people who study Rambam or read Rambam every year. And every year you read this, and it seems very, very wordy, and it seems, frankly, very repetitious. To be honest, till I learned the Sicha, I read these two halachas, and they sound like Rambam is excited, and then he's even more excited, but he's saying the same thing. Let's take a look. In halacha 6, it says, Tshuva is great. It brings you close to the Shekhinah. It brings near those who are far away. Previously, he was hated and disgusted and removed from Hashem. And now he's beloved, desirable, close, and dear. Beautiful. I got the message. He was far, now he's close. In halacha 7, he continues, how exalted is tshuva, the level of tshuva. Like, in case you didn't get it, I'm telling you, it's really great. I heard. And he goes on. Before, he was separate from Hashem, and he called out, and he's not answered. And now he clings to the Shekhinah. He calls out, and he's answered immediately. Why the repetition? And why in two separate halachas? If Rambam felt a need to go on and on and on, which again, this is a book of halacha, where generally things are concise. He doesn't just tell stories and give sermons. Not things are generally always concise. Why so wordy? What's the difference between 6 and 7? It's saying the same thing. And if for whatever reason he felt that he has to write all of it, and there's some more that I didn't put on the screen, but why put it in two separate entries? The Rebbe maintains the Rambam is so orderly and organized that if something is in a separate halacha, it's a different message. It's a slightly different law. Otherwise, he'd put it into one long one, which he does many, many times. So what is this about? We're studying now a Rambam. It's going to help us, and we'll come back to the Medrash before, but we're studying a Rambam, understanding the meaning of Rambam, Hilchos Tshuva, chapter 7, halacha 6 and halacha 7, how they're not repetitious, and they're not the same thing. So the Rebbe says, if you give a quick reading and you're careful reading, you will see that in halacha 6, it doesn't say that you cling to the Shekhinah. It says you become close to the Shekhinah. You become near to the Shekhinah. You become dear to the Shekhinah. You become beloved. In halacha 7, we add the dimension of clinging, davuk. This is a whole new thing. You could say, I'm your friend. I like you. I don't disgust you. I don't hate you. You're not abominable. In fact, you're beloved, and you're close, and you're desirable, and you're dear. I didn't speak about clinging. Dveikos, we're not becoming one. We're friends. We like each other. In halacha 7, it's a whole new kettle of fish. The guy is clinging to the Shekhinah. Says the Rebbe, don't you see? It's a different ball game. Talking about a different level of tshuva. That's why it's two entries. Halacha 6 is speaking about tshuva, nominal tshuva, lower level tshuva. How great is tshuva? How powerful is tshuva? It brings you close. You were far, now you're close. It brings you from far to close. Halacha 7 begins how exalted is the level of tshuva. And the Rebbe reads the Rambam with tremendous seriousness. Each word that the Rambam is hinting that this is an exalted level of tshuva. This is such a creative way of reading the Rambam. The Rambam is hinting, obviously, he's not saying it explicitly, that in 7 he's talking about an exalted level of tshuva. In the footnotes, he deals with it, what exactly those two levels might be. It doesn't matter. But clearly, the Rebbe maintains 6 is one level of tshuva, let's call it, basic tshuva, and then exalted level of tshuva. In the Hebrew, kama me'ula milas tshuva. We're talking about a different mila, a different level of tshuva. And this level of tshuva doesn't take you from far to close. It takes you from close to clinging. Aha! And that's why you'll notice that in this level of tshuva, we have the addition that you're answered immediately. immediacy is something that comes from clinging. Because if two things are clinging together, then one will automatically do what the other does. They're one, they're clinging. I'm suggesting the example, of a closeness of two friends or a closeness of body and soul, which are one. In terms of the immediacy of how fast I'm going to respond to a request or a need of the other. So if I have a need and I ask somebody else, if he's not a friend, let alone if he doesn't care about me, he's not going to do it. Even if he's a nice guy and he has nothing against me, maybe he will do it. When? Tomorrow, next week, next month, mañana. But if he's a close friend, he'll probably do it for me if he can, and maybe he'll do it soon. He's a close friend. We're close. As Rambam expresses in chapters in Halacha 6. We're close, we're beloved, we're dear one to the other. Are you kidding me? You want it, you'll have it soon. But immediacy? How could you have immediacy? I'm you and I'm me and you're you. We're two people, and one will ask the other, and he'll do it as soon as he can. Whereas if you think of a body and a soul, the minute the neshama wants something, the body responds. If you want to go someplace, you don't have to say to your feet, let's go. Let's go, Mr. Feet, let's move. The neshama wants to go, the feet go. It's immediate. And why is it immediate? Because it's clinging. The Rebbe is using a Rambam. First of all, explaining a Rambam and pointing out that when you find in Torah the concept of being answered immediate response, it represents a clinging. And the Rebbe doesn't have to make it up. It's in the Rambam. It's right in the book. Clinging to the Shechina, you're answered immediately. And the analogy of body and soul is an excellent one. Because body reacts to soul. You can't even say it reacts to soul. It is part of soul. It's one thing. You can't even the friendship between the two. You look at a living person, any part of the body, you can see is a living person. Because the body is one thing, it's souled. So therefore, now we have a way to understand the Medrash. We've laid down a principle, a foundation, based on the Rambam, that dveikus, clinging, when two actually become one, it triggers immediacy. It represents immediacy because it's natural. Just like the analogy of you want to walk, you walk. You want to talk, you start talking. You want to move your hands, you move your hands. Think of a bit of reactions. I cross the street and the car is going by, and I realize how long does it take to move out of the way? It's almost instantaneously because the body is part of the soul. It's clinging. It's literally one. And that is how this higher level of tshuva is. And therefore, the Rebbe now is going to continue this Sicha and apply this thinking to the Medrash above. That clearly, all those three have to be dealing with the concept of clinging. I'm just reminding you that the Rebbe already laid down the foundation, that it's not about who they were. It's not about that these were the greatest three tzaddikim, because then Eliezer wouldn't fit into the mix. But that these three prayers were about trying to accomplish something which brings Hashem so close to the world, so close to another reality, that the two literally become one, and therefore that prayer will be triggered immediately. That prayer resonates with immediacy because we're trying to create clinging. We're trying to create a oneness, a dveikus with Hashem and the creation. So let's take a look and see how those three fit that theme. So, the Rebbe says, let me just clean this up a second, I apologize. Whoops. The Rebbe says, the tefillah, the prayer of Shlomo HaMelech was for the Beis HaMikdash, which represents the clinging of Hashem to the world. Moshe was about prophecy because he was proclaiming to Koirach and his ilk. Moshe spoke many, many times in the Torah, but this particular time that he answered immediately because it was they brought into question his place as a Nabi. the concept that there are Nevi'im. And therefore, this was proclaiming the concept of prophecy. And Eliezer was the concept of Torah mitzvahs, as we'll see. The Rebbe points out that these are three areas where we want to show Hashem is one with the world. The general headline of this entire Sicha is that we know the purpose of creation is to reveal that the world is Hashem. The world is part of Hashem. That's the goal. We call it Dira B'Tachtonim. The world seems everything but the goal, the purpose of this whole plan is that there will come a day we're going to show Achdus Hashem. The real truth is nothing but Him. Obviously, this is a hard thing, and it's going to take all the gullahs because it don't look like that. But ultimately, that's the entire purpose. To show the truth. Eined Mulvade, it's all Him, and everything is one with Him, and clinging with Him, and it's all Him. So it's a process to be completed when Mashiach comes, but we're getting there slowly, steps. So there's a concept of bringing that unity out within the space of the world to show that the world, the physicality of the space, if you will, is one with Hashem. And then to bring it out within the people, that's a very important dimension, because people are the soul of the world, to find the concept that people will unite with Hashem and become fused with Hashem. And then the fusion of Torah and mitzvahs, which is that the physical things can carry Hashem's will and have holiness of Hashem as we have in Torah and mitzvahs, like your physical mezuzah and the Sefer Torah and Tefillin, or really any mitzvah, the physical object is actually one with Hashem. So what did we do? We showed in all three columns, these are the three big dimensions of the world. The space of the world, the actual physical world is one with Hashem. The people, because they're the ones who do this, they're the humans, the Yidden people, are one with Hashem. And then the Kedusha that's brought into the world actually through Torah and mitzvahs, Hashem's will down here. And this is reflected in these three columns. Shlomo HaMelech was trying to open the Beis HaMikdash. What is the Beis HaMikdash? It's a place in the world where heaven meets earth. It's a place in the world where there were constant miracles. Not a miracle happened. Constant miracles. It was a miraculous space. That means the world was acting like it's otherworldly. Nature was acting miraculous. This is a clinging. This is a kissing, a meeting of heaven and earth. That's why the Beis HaMikdash is such a big deal, and it's a glimpse of the real Dira B'Tachtonim, which will be culminated when Mashiach comes. But it's a real glimpse of it, because at least in that space in the world, Mashiach came. Heaven met earth. You came in and you saw that there's 10 constant miracles. Rain doesn't put out the fire, and space doesn't mean anything. The Aron is measured, and yet it's not measured, which is one of the examples that Rebbe cites, which is a powerful example because literally it's beyond space within space. It does measure, and that measure is immeasurable, as discussed in many places in the Kutei Sichas. So you see heaven and earth meeting, Hashem and His world uniting. It's kavaldik. It's a concept of clinging. Hence the immediacy in that prayer. Again, Moshe with the prophecy. Again, Moshe spoke many, 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 many times in the Torah. But only one time did his words come true. Immediately in the time when he was defending prophecy. Because prophecy, and he was, I guess, laying down the stake that prophecy is real. Tzaddikim. And the Rebbe points out this is one of the fundamentals of faith, that Hashem communicates through people, because to the Rebbe, this is part of the process of Dira B'Tachtonim. Hashem communicates with people. Why not? People could become one with Hashem. That's part of the concept that Hashem is really in everything and in everyone. Where do you see it? You see it in certain great lofty people. It's an indication of really what's really happening in the end with all of us. So therefore prophecy represents a real unity of Hashem and mankind, because the prophet, the word of Hashem would come through him. It wasn't just like a puppet. Hashem's ideas would be assimilated in his thinking. The Rebbe goes in detail, quoting from Shara Yichud Be'emunah, where it's described, chapter 2. Where it explains that what does it mean to be a prophet? The quote is, Devar Hashem diber bam, the word of Hashem. The word of Hashem speaks through them. And the language is from the Alter Rebbe, that Hashem's ideas literally become integrated and assimilated in their minds and in their understanding through the vision of the prophecy and in their thoughts and in their words. Literally, Hashem takes over their system and they think like Hashem and they feel like Hashem and they talk like Hashem. This is extraordinary. The Rebbe is explaining that in detail because you don't think that a prophet is like an antenna. Antenna doesn't know what's happening. He's just there and he's catching messages that he doesn't even understand. No, the Alter Rebbe makes the point and he's quoting the Arizal on this. This is true primarily with Moshe Rabbeinu, but in some fashion, this is really what all prophecy means, that Hashem and a human being merge. Much like the way the unity and the fusion exists in the Beis HaMikdash, where nature becomes supernatural, where worldly is otherworldly, space is beyond space. The same thing here. The person, he has a mind and he has a heart and he has thoughts and he has speech. And now they fuse with Hashem's. He knew what he was saying, the prophet. Again, there's different levels of them, but in concept, this became his thinking. He wasn't some kind of puppet, some kind of antenna. Extraordinary. So you see a concept of clinging. Hence, this prayer also was answered immediately. It's a ruling of halacha in the Rambam that when there's immediacy, when there's clinging, it's immediacy. And it's not just a ruling in the Rambam, it's common sense. As per the analogy we gave earlier, that body responds to soul immediately. Do you give the body a medal for walking when the soul wants to walk? That's all body is. It's clinging to soul. It's one with soul. The soul wants to walk, body walks. He doesn't even need to get a message. And therefore, that's an example of what a prophet is, the way the Beis HaMikdash is, and says the Rebbe that is similar, and even more so we're going to see when it comes to the story of Eliezer. The Rebbe says, and he's quoting from Chassidus at length in many, many places, that the theme of the story of Eliezer, the unity of Yitzchak and Rivka, it's a fundamental thing. It's a big deal. It's one of the big steps, precursors to Har Sinai, to Mount Sinai, when the Torah will come down, which the Torah coming down represents a unity, a marriage of heaven and earth, a marriage of the Dira B'Tachtonim, that whole theme, that God and the earth unite. And as the well-known thing that pre-Sinai, the mitzvahs weren't really permeating the physical. They always existed, but they didn't permeate the physical. You can't say that there was a physical holiness, because how could heaven meet earth? How could Hashem be in the physical? They're conflict. Physical is a separateness. That's what it proclaims. Torah mitzvah says no. The physical high becomes a holy thing. It becomes a Torah. And the truth is in every mitzvah in that sense. And that's what Sinai represented. It was a huge bombshell that Hashem is preparing us to receive the Torah. Not just to live a proper life, which the Yidden had Torah even before, but the Torah in the sense that our physical world has Kedusha, has Hashem in it through the mitzvahs. So it's explained in many Mamorim that the meeting of Yitzchak and Rivka and them becoming one represents and is a precursor and laying the ground for that unity of Torah mitzvahs. How so? Because Yitzchak and Rivka are polar opposites, just like heaven and earth. Just like Hashem and the physical hide of the animal that becomes a Torah scroll. Yitzchak was a holy being. He was the first human that was born a Yid and circumcised at 8 days, which means that even his physical flesh was holy. He was a holy person. He was Oila Tmima. He was a sacrifice. He couldn't leave the Holy Land. He was a human being that literally embodied Kedusha. Rivka, conversely, comes from Haran, a place of idolatry, and her father and her brothers, the lowest of the low. She's a regular human being. She hails from humanity at its lowest level. Obviously, she was the great in terms of her neshama, her potential. But her uniting with Yitzchak, and not just uniting, but when you get married, the two become one flesh. This is extraordinary. And that's why in many Mamorim Chassidus, the Rebbe is not, introducing this. The Rebbe is quoting from many places. This is classic Chassidus on this week's Torah portion. That what's the big deal about this story? And it's repeated 2 or 3 times. This is Sinai developing. We're on the way. We're walking down the aisle to Sinai, to that unity of heaven and earth, because look, Yitzchak and Rivka, one side to the other. That's why the Torah describes where Rivka came from and what her father was and what her brother was, the cheats, the idolatrous, the lowlifes. All the bad stuff brings home the concept that she's coming from the Tachton and she's going to connect to the Elyon. and they become one in marriage. There's no greater unity that exists in our world between people. Hence, this is a precursor to Torah mitzvahs. This represents the unity that mitzvahs will accomplish, that Sinai accomplishes, namely, that physical is infused with spiritual, with godly. And as the Rebbe explains in the Sicha, again, quoting many Mamorim of Chassidus, that this is hinted in the famous language, I believe from the Gemara, that the narrative about the patriarchs, even the servants of the patriarchs, is beloved to Hashem as much and even more as the Torah of the Jewish people, because it's repeated so much. And the Rebbe says, you see in that Chazal, that we juxtapose the narrative of the servants of the patriarchs, namely the story of Eliezer and Rivka and Yitzchak, with Torah. That this story is so precious to God, as much and more so than Torah. What's the connection of Torah and the narrative of this marriage? Aha, says Chassidus. Because it's the same thing. It's the theme of the unity of heaven and earth. Physical becomes holy. So now you got it. All three things are areas where we cling, where heaven meets earth, and therefore all three things represent immediacy. And therefore these were the three prayers that were answered immediately, to the exclusion of all others. So this is already a big part of the Sicha. But then the Rebbe goes further a little bit. Again, in the same vein, but a little bit more. And the Rebbe says, the piece that we want to have here. So far, we showed the common denominator. I want to just point out one detail. There's a lot of details, the footnotes, but I want to point out one detail in that point, that Eliezer's story is a reflection and a preparation for Har Sinai. As explained earlier, says the Rebbe, because we see that the Rashi brings down from the Midrashim, that when he gave her the two bracelets, and they weighed 10 gold pieces, this is hinting to the two luchos, the two tablets, that carried the Aseres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments. What's the connection? It's a huge connection. It's not just hinting that, this girl is going to marry Yitzchak and become the mother of the Jewish nation. The Jewish nation is going to get the 10 Commandments. The Jewish nation is going to have a lot of things. Should he give 40 shekels for the 40 years in the Midbar or the 40 days in the mountain? You know what I mean? It's a lot of different things the Jewish people have that he could have hinted to. According to Chassidus, these are the hints. The two bracelets weighing the 10 gold pieces as the two tablets for the 10 Commandments, because the story of Eliezer and Rivka, this is the story of Har Sinai. This is also the Rebbe is quoting from the Mamorim. Okay, but back to where we are now. The Rebbe says now we're going to go a step further and say not only are all three a common denominator, that they're all three represent an area where Hashem clings to the world. But Eliezer, the last one, the one about Torah and mitzvahs, has an edge over the others. And where do we see it? So we're sort of dividing this into two categories. We have the first two, and then we have Eliezer. Why are we setting it apart? Because if you look, the others were answered immediately. He was answered before he finished speaking. This was only true by Eliezer. It's very clear. In both of the other cases, the language is, when he finished speaking, this happened. It's immediate. But after he finished, here it happened before he finished. Terem kila ledaber. And Rivka comes out and the miracle happens. Aha, something's going on. So the Rebbe says this is a very big deal, and this is going to indicate that we have now two levels within clinging itself. What are the two levels of clinging? So if we take a look at the column of connection, the Rebbe says, this is deep, but it's simple, or it's clear, it's profound, but the Rebbe explains everything very clear. A lot of what I'm going to share now is based on the Kutei Sichos, volume 17, Shmini, which the Rebbe points out in footnote 63. That's where the explanation really behind this Sicha comes from. The Rebbe says the connection of two things that unite. Again, we're talking about clinging. We're not talking about two friends that are buddies. They help each other. But with two friends, there's no concept of clinging. When you say clinging, there's a connection. There's two types of connections. One could be two things that connect, and one can be that two things actually become one. A better way of saying it, that you discover an innate connection between the two. You might say that's the difference between a friendship and a marriage. A friendship is two people, they become close. A marriage ultimately is intimacy, two become one. And a child is literally two become one. And the reason is because you're really uncovering that innately these two souls are one. But al kapanim, this is the two types of connections. So the Rebbe is explaining to us that in the first two cases, Shlomo HaMelech and Moshe Rabbeinu, the Beis HaMikdash and prophecy, as we're going to explain in a minute, these are unifications, clingings with Elokus, with divinity, with Hashem. However, in a way that Hashem and the world are still two, but they're uniting. Whereas in the unity of Torah and Mitzvahs, which is expressed in the story of Eliezer and Rivka, Torah and Mitzvahs are one with Hashem innately. How so? We'll explain in a moment. But first, why would that make the difference if it should be the prayer should be answered immediately or should be answered even before it finishes? It's plain to see. If you're uniting two things, then there's still two things, even if they're united. So one has to impact the other. So you got to first finish one to get to the other. The example that I'm giving, I'm borrowing this from chapter 23 in Tanya. The patriarchs were a chariot to Hashem. That means that the chariot follows the horse. The chariot doesn't have its own thing. It's cleaving. It's clinging. You could say it's clinging. It's following. It's a unity. It's a tremendous thing we say about the patriarchs there. Hein HaMerkava, they were chariots to Hashem, and everything, every moment they did what Hashem wanted. They literally didn't, it wasn't a separate thing. They were hooked up. But a horse and a chariot are not one thing. Yeah, they are hooked up, and therefore they respond immediately. No one has to tell the chariot, did you notice that the horse started walking? Maybe you should also walk. It's automatic. But he has to get the message from the horse to the chariot through the pulling. So it's going to be immediate, but it's immediate. When the horse goes, the chariot goes. You can't put the cart before the horse. It doesn't have its own engine. It follows the horse because it's hooked up. The concept here is, though, that these are two things that are uniting. A will pull B. Automatically, immediately, I got it. But then there's an innate oneness, as the example of body and soul, where the body reacts almost before the soul tells it. The soul doesn't pull the body. The soul doesn't tell the body. The horse essentially tells the chariot to go. It doesn't say it verbally. He says it with the schlep. But he has to send a message. The proof is that it could be disconnected from the horse. If they forgot to hook it up, boom, it's not going to move. Body doesn't give a message to soul, let's go. In a healthy soul and a healthy body where everything is working, the body is souled. I know I invented that word. The body becomes like a soul. The body is innately created for soul, and the body is just a vehicle for soul. The Rebbe says in many places in Chassidus, that's why we see when, God forbid, the time comes and the soul leaves the body quickly decays. Why? It's a body. Maybe it should sit around. There's no such thing as really a body. A body is a casing for soul. It's a holder for soul. It's an expression of soul. It's all it is. Soul is gone, body goes. And certainly when a person is alive, the body is alive. It's not just alive in one part or the other. The entire body, look at any part of the body. You see soul. You see it's a living being. And therefore it's immediate. It's before immediate. Think about the reactions that we have. Think about sometimes the quick reflexes that we have to save our lives, to jump out of the way of a moving car or what have you. That the reflexes are not explicable. You didn't think about it. It's not like the person sat there and he said, oh, I think I should move. Let's move. You didn't even think about it. And the truth is, even in our everyday reactions, if we decide we want to walk, we walk. It's not when we finish deciding to walk, we walk. Like when the horse starts moving, the chariot moves. No, I want to walk, I walk. And I think it's seen even more so in in reflexive reactions, that soul and body are one, and the concept is a different level of oneness. Both levels here, horse, chariot, and body and soul, represent a clinging, a connection where two are literally fused completely. It's not like, unlike two friends and very close friends who really respect each other and care about each other, but still they're two people. There will never be real immediacy because one has to tell the other, the second one has to hear what he said and understand it and decide. Immediacy doesn't come into play when there's two things, as close as they might be. But if they're clinging, they're hooked up, boom, A brings B, it's immediate. But if A and B are really one innately, it's going to be beyond immediate. It's going to be before he finished speaking. Says the Rebbe, that was true only by the prayer of Eliezer, which, as we said earlier, is a precursor to Sinai. When Torah and mitzvahs show how Hashem permeates physical, where do we see that? Where do we see that Torah and mitzvahs is a greater unity than the Beis Hamikdash and prophecy? The Beis Hamikdash and prophecy is two things coming together. Hashem coming to the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem coming to the Navi. Whereas Torah and mitzvahs, Hashem is part of Torah and mitzvahs. Where do you see it? So you see it plainly in the fact and the consistency level. Beis Hamikdash, it's not everywhere. Hashem's presence is there, and we explained it in detail before, that literally the nature is supernatural. The space has no space. It's constant miracles. Yeah, it was a place in the world which was otherworldly, but it was only in that place. If you're telling me that Hashem and space are one, so how come it's only in that space? How could there be any space where it's not? It don't make sense. Is Hashem part of the world, or is he separate from the world? Well, in one place he's part of the world. That doesn't make any sense. So clearly it wasn't showing that the world is part of Hashem. Hashem is Hashem, the world is the world. You didn't yet show the concept of Achdus Hashem, that ain't Movade. However, Hashem picked one spot where he said, I'm going to start showing you the process of how it's going to be when Mashiach comes. What the real truth is, that it is in fact ain't Movade, and you're going to start seeing it in one place, that in that place, it's going to be Mashiach-dik. It's going to be Geuladik. In that place, the world will represent Hashem. But that's not yet showing that the two are one, because if they're one, it wouldn't just be in that place, it'd be everywhere. And it wouldn't just be sometimes. The Beis Hamikdash, unfortunately, was destroyed numerous times, which means is if anything can be sometimes yes, sometimes no, it represents it didn't become one, because if two are one, how could they not be? How could they not be? So, right, the temple was built and destroyed. There's a break. There could be changes. And the reason why there could be changes because the space is not really holy. Even that space is not really holy in that sense, even though the place of the Mikdash always remains holy. But it's not really that the physical space, even in that one place, is completely one with Hashem. No, Hashem united himself with it. Proof is that then he didn't unite himself with it in that same revealed way. Same thing as the prophecy. Yes, prophecy represents a revelation that Hashem could unite with mankind. But not always. The prophet wasn't full-time prophesying. He was a human being who would get messages. And then he would cease to prophesy and become back a normal person. For a little while, he was, like we said earlier, his mind and his heart and his thoughts and his speech were fused with that of Hashem's. But for the rest of the time, he wasn't. So what are you telling me, that he's one with Hashem? He's clearly not. He's one with Hashem for 5 minutes or for once in a while. So anything that's one with Hashem once in a while is not one with Hashem. You know, we use the example of a horse and a chariot. They can be connected and disconnected. A body and a soul, you can't say, well, they're one, and then tomorrow they'll be separate, and the next day they'll come back together. That don't work. If a body lives, he lives. You can't have breaks because he became one. He became one with it. And two that are really one, there can't be breaks. So prophecy, going back to that concept, it did not permeate completely and always, because it was not all the time. And the Rabbi even says that in general, it is said that the concept of prophecy it has ceased, even though we have tzaddikim and everything, but not in the same fashion. Or certainly the great numbers of prophets. That era sort of has ended. So it shows a lack of consistency, which shows a lack of unity, a lack of absolute oneness. And also, this is a very key thing, not so spelled out in the Sicha, that only some people have it. If you're telling me that mankind and one are really one, a Yid and Hashem are really one, how come you don't see it? There's a few Nabis, and most people are regular people. So therefore, again, this proves to the fact that this is not a total oneness. Mankind and Hashem are not one. Most people don't know what that means even. However, Hashem could unite with mankind. Proof is that sometimes some people have it. So the point being that it's a unity of Hashem to the mankind, but the two people that are connecting, the horse and the chariot. When it comes to the concept of Torah mitzvahs are one with Hashem. Hashem didn't connect himself with Torah. It always was. Torah is the languages. Torah and Hashem are one. They're literally one. They're one thing. It's him. It's his light. It's his extension. It's his will. It never was put together with him. And that's why when a Yid does Torah mitzvahs, he's able, therefore, to personally become one with Hashem. And the physical object with which he does it becomes a holy. The Torah becomes a holy object. God forbid it shouldn't fall on the floor. You kiss it. You give it honor. God forbid it's burnt. You bury it like it's a person. This Kedusha is literally part of Kedusha. And the reason is because this thing is an embodiment of Hashem. Because this is carrying in it Torah mitzvahs. Torah mitzvahs, again, did not connect to Hashem. It's just Hashem's expression. Call it Hashem's body, Hashem's will, Hashem's wisdom. And therefore, everything it touches gets that same connection. And therefore, the language is not only that Hashem and Torah are one, but as the Zohar further says, Yisrael, that the Jewish people, through Torah, become one with Hashem. Because the Torah has a certain oneness that we don't have, so to speak. Not speaking about the essence of the soul, but us per se as humans. The Torah has a oneness that you're not connecting two people, two things. It's an innate oneness. And when the Yid learns Torah, he becomes connected to Hashem on that level too. And the same thing is the physical things that he does become. And therefore, this is always, from when? From ever. And it never changes. There's no time when there is that connection. There's no like concept of a churban beis hamikdash within Torah. Torah is always holy. Mitzvahs are always holy, and in all places, and with every person who does it. You see a tremendous consistency on a whole different level. Consistency means, again, it's like body and soul. You can't have a break in it. It's going to be always. Obviously, when the time comes and they separate, so the gig's over for the body. But in terms of when they're united, you can't have a break. Most things in life, you can take a break, you can take a rest, you can talk, you can stop talking, you can walk, you can stop walking, you could be awake, you could sleep. But you can't have a moment of break between body and soul and then let's get back together. This was nice. Let's get back together another day. There's no such thing. God forbid there's a moment of the break. It's done. Because you can't have a break between innate oneness. If it's one, it's one. And that is a measure of understanding the oneness of Hashem with the world through Torah mitzvahs. Only Torah mitzvahs. And that was what's expressed. And that's why the response was immediate, beyond immediate. The Rebbe explains, why is this? Why is it that the Beis HaMikdash carried a oneness with Hashem, but not always inconsistent? And therefore it was two things uniting. And Sim ditto that with the prophecy concept. However, regarding Torah, the two are literally one always. And innately, it's explained because Torah is really, Torah is the way the unity of Hashem with Torah mitzvahs is a glimpse of the time of Mashiach. That's where we're heading. Hashem created a world and it completely hides him. And the goal is ultimately where the world will completely reflect him. It's going to be his body. It's not something that he controls. It's not something that he's connected to. It's not something that he blesses. It's him. That's Mashiach. And that is done through Torah mitzvahs, because Torah mitzvahs have that unity. So let's see this last column, how that is and why it's different than the other two. The Beis Hamikdash did show a unity with Hashem in the world, the concept of a miracle. But a miracle means that something bigger overpowers something smaller. Nature represents the world's rules, and Hashem, miracle represents Hashem's rules. Hashem says, aha, I'm the boss, and I can overpower it. But it still means A overpowers B. It didn't become the nature of the thing. Proof is it wasn't all the time, and it wasn't everywhere. It was, and it stopped. There was a visitation from Hashem to his world. I'm the boss. Wonderful. But you're you and I'm me. The world and Hashem are two. One is reacting to the other, connecting to the other, and sometimes and clinging to the other. But the fact that miracle breaks nature, and that's how it functions, by breaking the rules of nature, that itself is implicit. That it's not one. It's not the nature of the world. It's the supernatural position of the world. It's been overpowered. It's surrendered to something else, to someone else. It's a beautiful thing. But it doesn't mean that I am him. It means he's the boss. Ditto that with prophecy. What does prophecy mean? There's a human being, and he has his own mind and his own experiences. Maybe he's a tzaddik, but he's a human being. He has his own reality. Suddenly, for certain times, he sees a different reality. He feels different thoughts. He feels different words. That's a visitation. Hashem has overtaken his mind. A greater mind has overtaken his mind. He surrenders to it. And he's holy and he's batal and he's able to do that. But you're not going to say that he is it. He's part of that. The proof is that it's only for certain times and it's only for certain people. So it's a visitation. This is not yet dira b'tachtonim. Chassidus is not happy with half measures. The goal is dira b'tachtonim. Hashem has a home here. A home means it's a permanence. A home means because a home reflects ein ed milvado. The world is Hashem. It's just an expression of it. It's his body. And therefore, it's not going to be a visitation. Even a prophet. It was a visitation. He was a person who had his own views, very lofty views, a tzaddik and everything. But from time to time, he would have a different experience. This wasn't his daily experience. When it comes to Mashiach, which Mashiach is going to be the reflection? Mashiach represents a reflection and expression. And the reward, as it says in Tanya 36, for all our service of Torah and mitzvahs throughout Golos. And what is Torah and mitzvahs? We just finished explaining. It's Hashem's light, it's Hashem's will, it's Hashem's wisdom. It's just him. You want to call it his body? Ramach Evodim is Ramach Evodim de Malka. There's 248 mitzvahs. It's his limbs and arteries. Mitzvahs is literally a lakos. Not something that's connecting. It's a lakos. And which is really what Mashiach is going to be about. All people will see Hashem, not certain prophets. And the language of the prophecy is V'ro kol basar, all flesh will see. It's not going to be some outer body experience where you're overtaken by a different power. Human beings are going to be regular people. And it seems this is not going to be just a Jewish thing. It's going to be universal. Because it's going to, the reality is going to be such. Our reality will reflect, of course, this is God's world. But all flesh will see Hashem. How? With their physical eyes. Not like a prophecy who's visited by another thing and he has a new mind and the language is it becomes another person temporarily. No. Our plain reality, and therefore it will not change from one person to the other, will not change from different times. It's not a visitation. Now you're prophesizing, now you're not. This is my reality. And the same thing with the Beis Hamikdash. It was also temporary. When a Yid came to the Beis Hamikdash, he experienced Holocaust. He saw it. It was like a mini prophet. But this wasn't. When he went back home, he saw a different world. He saw the real world. When Mashiach comes, that real world will be like the Beis Hamikdash was. The whole world will be fused with Hashem. This will be the reality permanently and always. This is not going to be a prophecy. This is going to be what we see. And therefore, that's a whole different level of clinging. And it's not even two things clinging. It's uncovering that the two are innately one, much as Torah and mitzvahs are Hashem's light, Hashem's body, Hashem's will, etc., etc. I said earlier. And therefore the physical thing becomes holy, the Beis Hamikdash become holy, the whole world will become holy. Will be revealed that it's holy, that it's extension of Hashem, and all of humanity will know Hashem. Not even like prophets, just the way we know reality. Between the way it will be when Mashiach comes and the way it was in the Beis Hamikdash before is expressed also in the peace on earth that we had then and what we'll have when Mashiach comes. In the time of the Beis Hamikdash, there were periods of relative peace. And especially in Shlomo HaMelech, his name was Shlomo, Shalom Yeh B'Yom Aviyat Peace. But Chassidus explains this also is brought out more in the other Sicha, in volume 17, that peace, and in the footnotes there, that peace that Shlomo HaMelech brought about, it was extraordinary. You're seeing Gilul Lakus, you're seeing that Achdus Hashem seemingly. Hashem's in charge. Look, all the nations brought in taxes and there was peace. Yeah, but they were afraid of him, that's why. He was so powerful and so mighty and so great. By the grace of Hashem upon him, that all the nations said yes, they surrendered. You see how that reflects only the level one of clinging? Surrender. Just like the Beis Hamikdash, nature surrenders to miracle. Just like the prophet, his humanity temporarily surrenders to the divine. The nation surrendered to Shlomo HaMelech, to Hashem's people. But it wasn't that they became good. Proof is that era didn't last forever. If you become good, how could you undo it? If you are good, if you are one with Hashem, and how could you undo it? There can't be a reversal if that's who you become. But if you're just surrendering to something greater, something more powerful, then that has its time limitation. Mashiach comes, the whole world will be at peace, and forever and ever there will never be a destruction of the third Beis Hamikdash. Why not? Because with all kol basar, everyone will see it. They're all going to serve Hashem with the same commitment. Not because someone's going to tell them to do it, and if you don't, there'll be fear, etc. No. There's not going to be a need for coercion. It's going to be revealed that the world is Hashem, and everyone's part of the world. Everyone will know it. The same way we don't put our finger into fire, and no one has to say, don't do it. You just don't do it. It's not natural to do it. That's how it'll be when Mashiach comes. The language is that that if I'm picking a fig on Shabbos, the fig tree will scream, it's Shabbos. Again, I don't know if it's going to say it in English or in Hebrew, or if it's just going to bespeak it. The way the fire screams, don't put your hand into me, it doesn't have to say it in the language. Nature says, this is fire, don't put your finger. Nature will say, nature. Nature will say, it's Shabbos. How could you pick a fig on Shabbos? It's Hashem's world. And Hashem don't want you to pick figs on Shabbos. It's unpickable. And therefore, again, back to the peace on earth, the whole world recognizes that it's part of Hashem's world. And therefore, there's no place for wars and for hate and for fighting Hashem's people, etc. Because it became totally united. I want to suggest that this, and says that, but this reflects itself in the immediacy of Eliezer's prayer, even greater than Moshe and Shlomo, that it was answered even before he asked. Because if it's really one, then there's no time difference, as explained earlier, with body and soul. So perhaps this explains many of the other things that our Chazal tell us what's going to happen when Mashiach comes. Chazal and the Nevi'im. For example, it says a pasuk, you're going to be pregnant and give birth at the same time. 8 hours later, 9 hours later. Why is that important? Immediacy. Why does it take time for the miracle of birth to happen? Because birth is a miracle. It's Yesh Me'ayin. It's Hashem acting with nature. It takes time. Does it say that it's Ishtalshalos? It has to come down. It has to process. You have to arrive from A to B. There's a distance. But if it's revealed that the world is Elokus, so what do you mean? It's immediate. Terem kilo l'daber. You're supposed to have a baby, there's a baby. There's another Chazal which says, Asi the Eretz Yisrael shetoitzi gluskoi suklei milas. The Holy Land of Israel, which by some accounts will be the whole earth, will give forth delicious delicacies, baked goods, ready to go, straight from the earth, and fine clothing, klei milas, fine wool or fine silky clothing, Not that you're going to have to create the baked goods or create the clothing from the wool or from the linen that you take from the earth, etc. No. The land will give out baked goods and delicacies and beautiful clothing. And you wonder, like, without this Sicha, without the Chassidus and the Rebbe's wisdom, like, why is that important? That's what I need, a miracle. I can take the earth and I can develop it and plant it and create flour and create the baked goods myself. And the same thing with the clothing. Hashem has to show a kuds that the earth is automatically going to instantaneously give it out on its own, so to speak. And the answer is, of course. Chassidus is not taking half measures. We want one thing. We're not going to settle for anything less than that. To recognize that there's only one being. Achdus Hashem. This is the whole Chassidus, this is the whole Torah, this is the whole creation. That in this place of Tachtonim, such a concealed place where you hardly even recognize that there's a creator, if you don't look. To find out that it's not only is there creator, this is the body of the soul of the creator. The soul of the it's one with Hashem. It's literally a likus. And in the end of the Sicha, in the footnotes, the Rabbi says even more. Not only the Hashem is the soul of the world, but it's one with Hashem's essence. That oneness, that innate oneness, obviously, the earth gives out everything. There's no need for a process. There's no need to plant, and then you're going to bake, and you're going to make, and you're going to decorate the cake. If there's a bracha, it comes out. It's ready-made cake. It's ready-made clothing. It is immediacy because it's a lakus. It takes Hashem time to make a cake. He has to go through the seasons. If you think about it, all of these things that took time, this is part of the curse of Adam and Chava, the childbirth and the planting, which that curse is really part of the reality of being a tachton, of being a place where you don't feel the alien. And clearly, you don't feel Hashem's presence. So there's a process. And there's a lot of virtue to that. And we feel like we're partners and we do our role, all wonderful stuff. But the indication thereby is that we're separate. Blessed by Hashem, and He implanted and He gave us intelligence, He gave us the ability to do it. All that, and that's wonderful. It's a gift in its own way. But ultimately, it's not bringing home the message. When Edom Avadi comes to light, the world reacts to Hashem. Hashem wills it. There's cakes, there's cookies, there's the best stuff that you ever, all the stuff, and I'm told that it's not going to be unhealthy, and there's not going to be any issues with the calories and everything else, and we'll be able to ask us to eat. But the concept being because it's all one thing with Hashem. The takeaway, I mean, there's a million takeaways. First of all, the Chassidus is all about Enid Movade, to find Hashem in our reality. And to recognize, number two, to recognize how powerful Heda mitzvahs are. There's more Kedusha in a pair of tefillin and a Shabbos licht, arguably, than in the Beis HaMikdash. At least the first two. Because this is Mamish Elikos. I hope I don't get struck down by a lightning from saying it, but that's ultimately what it seems to say. A Yid sits and learns Torah, a Yid puts on tefillin, a Yid does a mitzvah, a Yid gives a penny to tzedakah. This is Elikos in action, as detailed in chapter 23 in Tanya, perhaps in a way that even the Beis HaMikdash didn't have it. This is a glimpse of the third Beis HaMikdash. This is Geula Dik. It's a moment of Elikos touching down and uniting and actually revealing that physical is spiritual. You have a quarter, it's not a quarter, it's Hashem, it's tzedakah. And another takeaway or another expression of this is that Rebbe was very much into the concept that everything that we need should be revealed good. The Rebbe spoke about, the Rebbe wasn't happy with brachas that are good in heaven. The Rebbe always wanted Toiva Nidava Nigla, revealed good. Like why? If you open up Tanya chapter 26, he explains very detailed that sometimes there's a hidden good. Chasadim mechusim, and that's a greater goodness. And the Rebbe brought home for our generation, as we're rounding third base and coming home to Mashiach, that he wanted all the brachas, Teva Nidava Nigla, and he didn't tolerate otherwise. And we know some of the very painful sichas after Mrs. Lapine was killed, Hashem Yinkum Dama, that the Rebbe didn't understand how is it possible that should be something bad. What, he didn't know history? But the Rebbe is saying, no. We did a shvi. We're bringing the Shechina down. If the Shechina is down, there's got to be revealed goodness now, here. There shouldn't be a time lapse. There shouldn't be a gap. There shouldn't be a goodness, but it's hidden. Where's it hidden? Where's did it go? There's no levels. There's just one level, Hashem. How many times did the Rebbe say, Ad meheda yoruz devore, the bracha should come quick? The Rebbe was very into Birchas Keirim. The Rebbe would ask people to say Birchas Kainim all the time. And it became a custom. People would say Birchas Kainim to the Rebbe on Yud Aleph Nisan and Yud Aleph Kislev on his anniversary. What's the Birchas Kainim? Because Birchas Kainim, it says Ad Mehedi Yeres Devarei, that the bracha comes quick, immediate. The Rebbe was so into this. Like, what's the rush? I'll get the bracha. I'll be tomorrow. Jewish history's been around for 3,000 years. Suddenly we need it tomorrow, immediate. The record I heard that the Rebbe has said, I don't know the source, that Yasha Chayli, if I had the strength, I would institute the Birchas Kainim every day, like the Svardim do. That's what I heard. I'm pretty sure that it's correct. I once verified it. Like the Rebbe didn't do it in practice, but the Rebbe wanted to do it. That indicates that there's value. What does he have this thing with Birchas Kainim? Because the Rebbe can't tolerate a time delay. He can't tolerate a hidden goodness. These are all conflicts. These are all conflicts to the real truth, that it's God. If God is the soul and the world is the body, imagine, God forbid, I have a body, and the body reacts, but it takes a few minutes. Hashem should protect us from such a thing. I want to walk. I could walk, but take me a few minutes to get my foot moving. Rahman al-Islam, that's tzaddik, to the Rebbe, to the Nasi of Deir Shvi, whose job is to bring the Shechina lamata la'aretz. That ain't good. That's not a plan. A Yid should have harchava begashmis is another thing that Rebbe was so bent on it. You know the famous debate that Rebbe had with the Kapishnan Rebbe, who was close to him and close to the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was the father-in-law of Rabbi Zalman Gerari Shalom. And the Kapishnan Rebbe and the Rebbe were speaking, and there was a lot of respect, obviously, between them. The Rebbe was much younger than him, and some might know that he was very involved in pushing the Rebbe to accept the Nesias. And the Rebbe respected him. He was probably a very holy Jew. And the Rebbe wanted him to agree with the Rebbe's approach that Yidden should have wealth. Unlike what it was in the past in the old country, where most Yidden were poor. And he didn't want to agree because the conventional wisdom of tzaddikim was, who needs money? Mirroring a little bit Tanya chapter 21. There's hidden goodness, the spiritual goodness, physical goodness. That's what we need. It's a test, gets in the way. And the Rebbe argued with him and debated with him until he finally got him to agree and proclaim that yes, Yidden should be benched with Ashirus. And we see it now. Post Gimel Tammuz, this is one of the things that we see in perhaps as a glimpse of the concept of Yatim B'Chayoyi. You know, Shluchim, you'd struggle. Today you have Shluchim, young Shluchim, that dealing with millions, putting up buildings. And in Anash communities, Baruch Hashem, and Bechlal in the Fruma Welt, there's tremendous wealth, alongside Limud HaTorah and Tzedakah. This is not an accident. This is the Rebbe in action. This is Mashiach Dik. Why would the Rebbe so bent on this? Yeah, it's a test. But the Rebbe wanted us to take the test of wealth. And it was a big deal. He didn't accept anything less. Because anything less means that physical is a conflict with spiritual. That Hashem's truth and blessing does not permeate it everywhere, even in your pocketbook. No, it's got to be everywhere. It's got to be revealed goodness. It's got to be immediate. And it's got to be plenty, spiritual plenty and physical plenty.